All right, now it's time for some Prince, but also talking about controversial policies that surround this idea that internet gaming can become pathological gaming Thank you, Prince. All right. So, with a little help from Prince, I want to talk about some controversial policies. So I mentioned on the last video that one of the controversies about treating internet gaming as if it can become a disorder that requires treatment is that in some countries, there have been policies adopted by the government to intervene with the way in which and the amount of time that people, especially young people under the age of 18, are able to engage in online gaming. And the question is this necessary? Is it an infringement of personal freedom? Is this too much government intrusion in something that's not even a disorder? And even things that are a disorder don't necessarily allow for such types of government intrusion. So I want to talk about that. On these next two slides, we're going to talk about the controversy involved. Sorry, my phone just decided to beep in the middle of my video, which is kind of apropos for this class because we're going to talk about, what do you think we're going to talk about? We're going to talk about smartphone addiction later on in class today. Anyway, let's talk about these controversial policies, shall we? Slide number 5, shutdown time, as it's often called. It's the idea that youth in particular, under the age of 18, minors under the age of 18, need their internet time curtailed, meaning need some control over the amount of time they are allowed to spend on the internet because of its addictive potential. Now, again, keep in mind, these policies are based on something that is not a disorder in the DSM. In South Korea in particular is known for its stringent policies to curtail youth internet use. They have what's called shutdown policy that attempts to limit access for those under the age of 18 between midnight and 6 a.m. So minors under the age of 18, limited internet access between midnight and 6 a.m. And the way they go about this is they require an age verification process for online use for anyone who is going to go on the internet after midnight and between midnight and 6 a.m. This was initiated in 2011, and it actually has continued despite challenges, constitutional challenges in Korea. It remains highly controversial among the populace, but it has still remained legally, it has still remained in place. And sometimes this is referred to as a no-use time zone between the hours of 12 a.m. and 6 a.m. for people under 18. It was implemented, there goes my phone again, it was implemented due to the perception that internet overuse had become far too widespread and prevalent amongst Korean youth. Use? Did I say? See that? Internet use, Korean use? No. Internet use amongst Korean youth. There we go. Use, youth. Blah, blah, blah. My mouth is getting all jumbled. And the belief on the part of the government is that their grades and their health were being impacted. So they instituted this policy. The evidence gathered has not really supported in general the idea that the shutdown law is improving youth mental health in sort of the long term. I mean, this has been in effect since 2011, so we're talking 9 years. There's been enough time to gather some data. The data does not generally suggest that mental health in youth is improved in South Korea since this law was instituted compared to before it was instituted. In 2017, Lee, Kim, and Hung did a study, and they found the policy increased the sleep totals in youth by approximately only 1.5 minutes. Hear me on this. Not 1.5 hours, 1.5 minutes. And it reduced the probability of their developing gaming addiction by only 0.7%. Not even 1%. 0.7%. In 2018, a researcher by the name of, this is a hard one to pronounce, it is Przybylski, 2018, found that digital screen time had a negligible effect on pediatric sleep. So almost not even measurable. It was so low. The same researcher concluded that other contextual factors such as the quality of family life, what's happening at school, and their peer relationships were more important, more responsible, more culpable, which means responsible, for a decline in sleep than their screen time was. In other words, screen time online was not a reliable predictor. These other factors were. Now, Thailand enacted a shutdown law similar to South Korea's law in the early 2000s, and they later repealed it for reasons that had to do with constitutional challenges and also finding that it wasn't very effective in doing what they hoped it would accomplish. Vietnam and China have also implemented or considered the shutdown law. In 2018, so only 2 years ago, French politicians in France voted to ban the use of mobile phones in both primary and middle schools. Now, if we were in class, of course, this would be a great discussion to have, right? I would say, what are your thoughts? Raise your hand, raise your hand, raise your hand. What are your thoughts? Alas, I cannot do that. So I'm going to say it on video. What are your thoughts? And I want you to think about this before you move on to the next slide. Do you think these laws are appropriate? Do you think that they are likely to curtail mental health problems, school decline, sleep decline, or do you think that this is just one sort of microcosm of what young people are involved in, and it in and of itself does not impact these things sufficiently to enact these kinds of laws? Okay, after you've thought about that, I want you to meet me on slide number 6. Controversial policies continued, something known as fatigue systems and warning messages and ratings for addictiveness. What are fatigue systems, right? When you think fatigue, you think getting tired, not wanting to do anything anymore. So fatigue systems are systems that are put in place to de-incentivize ongoing gameplay, right? So let's talk about what incentivizing means. You probably have played games online, right? And there are certain games that if you play long enough and do well enough in the game, you even can get money, you can get points that you can exchange for things online. Those are incentives. Incentives are external rewards that make us want to keep involvement in an activity, right? So the idea is, how can we de-incentivize online gameplay so that it's not as attractive for people or not as rewarding for young people to continue to engage in for lengthy periods of time? Here are some examples that some countries have implemented. Allotting fewer points, even if people keep playing and jump to certain levels of a game, they don't continuously linearly get more and more and more points as they jump levels, or they get fewer points across time. Allotting fewer achievements. In other words, the game doesn't go on as long. There are some games that have like 3,000 levels or something. I'm playing a game right now. I do play online games sometimes, not often. I'm playing a game right now. It's a word game, like an unscramble anagram thing. And I mean, it's got like 3,000 levels or something. I'm on level 400. So the idea is, if there are fewer levels, the game ends sooner and people won't spend as much time online. Young people won't spend as much time gaming online. There are also ideas some countries have implemented, like the game just stops after a certain time limit, rather than continuing as long as there are levels to continue. No matter what the person is doing, no matter how well they're doing at the game, it shuts off after you've been playing for a certain amount of time. Another idea are warning systems, which involve things like, literally, once players have been playing past a certain predetermined time limit, like, I don't know, 2 hours, an hour, they will get a warning that tells the player, maybe you should stop playing for a while and do something else. Maybe you should take some time away. Or a warning like on cigarette packs, warning, the Surgeon General warns that smoking can be hazardous to your health and causes cancer. Something like warning, if you continue to play for too long, evidence suggests, blah, 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 you can get addicted, even though, as you guys know from these past few lectures, the evidence doesn't exactly suggest that. It's equivocal, it's up in the air, it's doubtful, we don't know. Okay, so at present, regulations in China, for example, it seems like most of these fatigue systems, warning messages, are much more common in China than any other country. Now, having said that, game designers could, when they design the game, they could actually build these kinds of de-incentivizing things or warning messages into the games themselves. As you could imagine, from a profit standpoint, a lot of businesses are not going to want to do that because it would make people not want to buy their game, right? Let's be honest, right? I mean, think about, other products, right? If you're a runner, as it is, you have to change your sneakers every 4-ish months, 3 to 4 months. If you're an avid runner, run frequently. Imagine if like your running sneakers stopped working and fell apart around your foot. Like you're running, you're doing your run, and then at 1 month, your sneakers fell apart. Like you wouldn't buy those sneakers, right? So similarly, you're probably not going to buy a game if it has these things in them that de-incentivize your play. There have been critiques of these types of fatigue systems and warnings in terms of privacy issues. And also, again, people engage with these games to have a meaningful experience. They pay for these games because they want to enjoy the play. And if you put these things into these games that they're paying for, then it's argued they're paying for something that's not giving them the enjoyment and meaning from the product that they purchased in the first place. There are not many empirical research studies on the effectiveness of fatigue systems. So that's the other problem. We don't have a large body of research where we can say, hey, this is a good idea because it, quote, works and reduces young people's time on screen. We don't have a really good sense of any research that shows, oh, if we put these systems in, it improves their sleep, it improves their engagement in other activities, it improves their schoolwork and their grades. We just don't have a lot of data, in part because not many countries use them, right? There's not a lot of data to support this. There are personal freedom reasons that can be argued legally against it, and also for game makers and the fact that it's a profit-bearing industry that infringes on their product and infringes on their ability to sell their product. The other piece of it is, if we talk about intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, this is really important. The assumption in these fatigue system ideas is that the only reason that people continue to play these games is to get some external reward, right? Some incentive. But what about intrinsic motivation? Extrinsic motivation is reward-based. You play the game because you're going to get more points. You play the game because if you gather enough points, you can buy something online, whatever, or money. That's all extrinsic motivation, external rewards. What about intrinsic motivation? We know that sometimes people continue to play the game because they really enjoy it. They feel a sense of accomplishment if they can beat the next level and the next level and the next level and the next level. It's just about accomplishment, right? It's not about getting an external reward. It might just be pure joy, enjoyment. It's not about an external incentive. So these types of de-incentivizing fatigue systems and warning messages would really only target external rewards, extrinsic motivation. It wouldn't really target internal, right? Internal reasons, internal reward, intrinsic. motivation. So this relates to something in psychology referred to as self-determination theory. This is a theory of motivation. So, in other words, it's a theory that explains why people do the things they do. What causes them to initiate certain behaviors and not others? What causes them to continue in those behaviors and not others? And self-determination theory is really about intrinsic motivation. It's about sometimes people initiate certain behaviors and continue in that pattern of behavior, not for an external reward, but for things like internal growth needs. What are called innate or inborn psychological needs, not external incentives. So things like feeling more accomplished, things like enhancing your skill at something, right? You might play certain games because it increases your hand-eye coordination. You might play certain music games because it makes you a better musician. It's not about external rewards or points or money. It's about your own internally driven needs for growth, for accomplishment, things like that, improvement. And none of those incentives that are in the games in the first place are about those kinds of needs. Those hit the external motivations, the external extrinsic rewards. Now, another thing that has been discussed, Belgium is a country that has done this to some extent. Ratings for the addictiveness potential of a game. Now, again, it's a little odd to have a rating system for addictiveness potential when the whole concept of internet addiction and internet gaming disorder and pathological gaming is not even in the DSM. I have to keep coming back to this, right? How can you talk about addiction potential when it hasn't even been established in the psychiatric and medical community that this is a form of addiction? Having said that, the idea of ratingness? No, I just smushed together the word ratings and addictiveness. The idea that we can rate different games for addictiveness potential kind of goes along with warning systems and rating systems for music, parental advisory, things like that. Movie ratings, right? PG, PG-13, R, that kind of stuff. Something called loot boxes in Belgium. This is a mechanism that is kind of like gambling. And the idea is just like with gambling, people will often obviously want to keep playing and playing and playing and playing because they can get money, loot money, right? The idea about this is don't allow as much money to be won on these games so that people are not, like gamblers are drawn into playing and playing and playing and playing. People are not repeatedly playing the game because they're winning money, they're winning money, they're winning money. The problem about this, a problem with this is, again, does it make sense to be regulating something for addiction potential if it's not really yet known to be an addiction, right? Belgium is known to be a leader in countries across the world in trying to rate and enforce the ratings of the addiction potential of games. So what they basically do is they say, games that allow you to earn money and things of that nature, that's the same as gambling. Games that you're essentially playing to earn something, that's an externalized incentive, is just like gambling. And gambling is not legal for people under the age of 21 in this country, 19 in Canada. So they're saying, let's treat it the same way. And then they're saying that way we can regulate the amount of gaming that people under the age of 18 do. But then you have to ask whether or not other hidden prizes that are popular amongst kids' games should also be regulated, right? Like that, once we start using the analogy of gambling and saying online points, money, etc., that can be amassed by the player in exchange for whatever they do on the game, then you got to start asking about other games that kids play that have similar analogies to gambling. And then where does it end? Where does the regulation end for doing that kind of thing? And again, I want to repeat, how in the world can we rate games for addictiveness potential when we don't even have a category in the DSM that has made this an addiction? And the research is equivocal, right? It's uncertain with regard to what the criteria is to distinguish between a pathological form of gaming and a non-pathological form of gaming. So I think, we need to be really careful about how these regulations are being determined. Further research is required. But again, before I end this video, I just want you guys to think about this fatigue system idea, these warning messages, and this loot box idea being treated like gambling in Belgium. Does this make sense? Is this too intrusive? Is it based on data we don't have? What are your thoughts about that? Again, I wish we were in class because I could say raise your hand. I really want to hear what you guys think about this idea, especially those of you who might be internet gaming folks and really like to game and play games on the internet. Really curious what you think about this. So think about it in your head. It's too bad we don't have we couldn't, it's too bad we can't communicate telepathically and I could hear your thoughts, but I can't. So I will meet you on the next video.